Somewhere in a box at your parents' house, there's a photo of you. Maybe you're two. Maybe you're covered in cake, or asleep on someone's shoulder, or mid-scream in a bathtub. You have no memory of that moment. None. You've seen the photo so many times you might feel like you remember it. But you don't. You're just remembering the photo. That's strange when you think about it. You were there. Your eyes were open. Your brain was working. So why does that entire stretch of your life, the first 2, 3, sometimes for years, come back to you as almost total silence? The real answer isn't that your brain failed you. The real answer is that, for a while, your brain wasn't built to hold onto you at all. Scientists call this infantile amnesia, the universal human inability to recall specific personal experiences from early childhood. And it isn't rare or unusual. It happens to everyone. Every adult on Earth has the same blank stretch at the start of their life, give or take a few months, for a long time. Researchers assumed the simplest explanation was the right one. Babies just don't form memories yet. No memory in, no memory out. Case closed. But that explanation doesn't hold up. Watch a 1-year-old reach for a toy you hid under a blanket 10 minutes ago. Watch them recognize their mother's voice from across a noisy room. That's memory. That's a brain encoding information and pulling it back out. So if babies can clearly remember things in the short term, why does almost none of it survive into adulthood? This is where the story gets stranger than babies don't remember, the part of your brain responsible for stitching together personal story-like memories is called the hippocampus, a small, curved structure tucked deep in your temporal lobes, named for its resemblance to a seahorse. It's the difference between knowing how to ride a bike and remembering the specific afternoon you learned. The hippocampus handles the second kind, the episodic kind. The "this happened to me, here, on this day" kind. And in infancy, that structure is still under construction. Researchers like Patricia Bauer, who has spent decades studying memory development in young children, have shown that babies are absolutely capable of encoding memories. They just lose access to them at a much faster rate than older children or adults. The information goes in. It just doesn't stay retrievable for long, because the hippocampus hasn't finished building the wiring needed to file it away for permanent storage. There's a number that anchors a lot of this research. Most adults' earliest memories cluster around age 3.5. Not 0. Not 1. 3.5. That's the rough point where the curtain starts to lift. Before that age, the system isn't fully offline, but it's nowhere near finished either. It also doesn't lift all at once. The earliest memories people do recall tend to be fragments rather than full scenes: a smell, a specific room, the feeling of a hand around theirs, with no surrounding story attached. That fits the construction site model perfectly. A half-built structure doesn't produce nothing. It produces partial, disconnected pieces, because the wiring needed to bind sight, sound, location, and time into one coherent memory simply isn't fully connected yet. You don't get a movie. You get a few salvage frames. There's also a strange wrinkle in how this fades. Psychologist Carol Peterson has tracked children's memories over years, returning to interview the same kids again and again as they get older. Her work shows something unsettling. Children can clearly recall events from when they were 2 or 3 years old, right up until somewhere around age 7. When those same memories start vanishing, even though the child had been reporting them accurately just a year or 2 earlier. The amnesia doesn't only strike in infancy. It can creep back in years later and quietly delete memories that had, for a while, survived. So is it just slow construction? A brain region that simply hasn't matured yet, like a muscle that hasn't grown strong enough to lift the weight. Here's the twist. In 2016, neuroscientist Christina Alberini and her team ran an experiment on infant rats that complicated the whole story. They trained very young rats to associate a specific space with a mild experience at an age equivalent to human infancy. As expected, the rats forgot it almost immediately, the textbook definition of infantile amnesia, but the memory wasn't actually gone. It was hiding. When the researchers gave the rats a small reminder cue later in life, the original memory came roaring back, specific, detailed, and tied to that exact original context. The information had been sitting there the whole time, dormant, like a file saved in a format the rat's brain couldn't yet open. The hippocampus wasn't failing to store the memory. It was storing it in a form that early development made temporarily unreadable. That reframes the entire phenomenon. Infantile amnesia might not be about forgetting at all. It might be about access. Your brain isn't necessarily erasing your earliest years. It might be archiving them in a format your adult mind never learned to open. And there's a second layer to this that makes it even more counterintuitive. The very thing that erases your early memories is also the thing that makes early childhood the fastest learning period of your entire life. During infancy, your brain is producing new neurons in the hippocampus at an extraordinary rate, a process called neurogenesis, literally, the birth of new brain cells. Researchers, including Paul Franklin, have proposed that this flood of new neurons is partly why early memories don't stick. Each new neuron has to wire itself into existing circuits, and in doing so, it can disrupt or overwrite the connections that were holding old memories in place. The same biological engine that lets a toddler absorb an entire language in 18 months is, indirectly, the thing erasing the toddler's diary. Your brain wasn't choosing between remember your life and learn at superhuman speed. It picked speed. It bet on building a mind that could absorb language, faces, danger, safety, and an entire model of the world. Even if that meant sacrificing the receipts, from an evolutionary standpoint, that trade actually makes sense. A human infant is born almost helpless, with a brain that needs years of rapid wiring just to catch up to a world it has to survive in. Holding on to a permanent, story-based memory of year one would have done very little for an infant's survival. Learning to recognize a caregiver's face, learning the sounds of a native language, learning what's dangerous and what's safe, that mattered immensely. Evolution appears to have prioritized building the learning machine over preserving its earliest outputs. So if the memories are technically still in there, in some latent, locked form, what does that mean for you right now? It means the years you can't consciously recall didn't pass through you without effect. They're still shaping you, just not as memories you can narrate. Attachment researchers have long pointed out that the emotional patterns formed in your first few years, how safe or unpredictable your environment felt, how reliably your needs were met, tend to surface later as instincts rather than stories. You may not remember the specific day you learned that crying brought someone running, or that a certain tone of voice meant danger, but your nervous system remembers the lesson, even with the footage missing. Notice how often this shows up outside of childhood, too. You've probably flinched at a smell, a piece of music, or a particular street and felt a wave of feeling with no obvious source. No memory surfaces to explain it. Just the feeling, arriving on its own, fully formed. That's not your mind malfunctioning. That's closer to what Alberini's rats experienced, a memory trace sitting in storage, untouched, occasionally brushed by a reminder cue close enough to nudge it without ever fully opening the file. You're not imagining a connection that isn't there. You're brushing up against a record you were never given the password to read. It also reframes a very ordinary kind of frustration. People sometimes feel almost ashamed that they can't remember their childhood the way they remember last summer, as if better effort or a sharper memory could call those years back. But the limitation was never about effort. It was architecture. No amount of straining recovers a memory that was filed in a format your 3-year-old brain wasn't yet equipped to retrieve as an adult. That's the part that should change how you think about your own past. You're not missing those years because nothing happened. You're missing them because your brain hadn't yet built the equipment to hand them back to you as memories. The experience still landed. It just landed in a body that, at the time, had no way to write it into a story. Think about that the next time you look at that photo of yourself as a toddler, the one you don't actually remember. You weren't absent from your own life. You were simply too early in construction to keep the receipt. The moment still happened to you. It's just filed somewhere your adult mind was never given the key to.